Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. Joining me today, again, smartest guy in the room, the mayor of Beckerville, USA, Michael Becker. Michael, how are you?
Hey, Paul. I think we're doing okay. How are you?
Well, I think I'm doing okay. I mean, as everybody has seen just recently, interest rates have gone up tremendously. And we just had the FOMC meeting that just gave us another lovely gift of 0.75 of a point of an interest rate rise on the short-term rates. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll just kind of get the status of the market from you, Michael. But before we talk about that, I'm super excited to have a friend of ours that I've known for a long time. Michael's known him for a long period of time, and we think he's a quality operator of multifamily properties here, not only in the Texas area, but he operates throughout the southern part of the United States too. And we'll talk to, and we're glad to have Mr. Charlie Young with Madera. Charlie, how are you?
Hello, gents. Doing great. Good to be with you today.
Fantastic. And so, Charlie, I'm going to kick this over to Michael, but we certainly do appreciate you coming in, and I'm looking forward to hearing some stories from the always interesting operator from Madera, Mr. Charlie Young. So, Michael, take it away.
Yeah, Charlie, maybe we kind of just start with your background. I don't know, like Paul mentioned, we've all kind of known each other for a while. Charlie, I think's a pretty fierce competitor of mine in a lot of ways. We go up against some deals.
Just not in San Antonio.
Just not in San Antonio or Houston. We don't or Austin really much, but up here in Dallas, we go bang it out from time to time against each other. But anyway, so Charlie, you're with Madera Residential. Maybe you give kind of a quick background on Madera and yourself, and kind of we'll get into it a little bit from there.
Yeah, so I got into the business passively in 91, 31 years ago. Bought 24 units out of the RTC with two other guys, and then bought another 24 units. These were in Andrews, Texas. Yeah, Andrews, Texas. And they were 24 units across the parking lot, all owned by three different S&Ls. So we bought one, we bought the other. We didn't get the third one. So we ended up with 48 units, and I was doing a day job at the time, went pro in multifamily in 96, cut my teeth on an awful lot of fee management in the markets. And then Madera kind of fires up in 2008. That's when we sponsored our first deal. And we slugged it out. That was a great time to hit the market in July of 2008, right before the hurricane literally and financially comes through in Baytown, Texas, with the Great Recession and with a hurricane. But we lived through that, learned a lot of lessons, and kept moving forward. And then as time has gone on, we bought about somewhere north of 30,000 units. And I don't know how many we've sold today. Well, I guess we've sold about 15 or 16,000 of those because we're roughly 14,000 units today, primarily in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston.
Yep. And then so as far as like the types of deals that you've done, we get into some stories here a little bit later, but you predominantly been playing largely in the workforce housing for the majority of that. And then you've kind of been transitioning into some nice, big, pretty Class A deals. Is that generally kind of what's kind of the target over the years, and how's that evolved?
No, whenever we started, it was all, they were workforce housing, C's, some D's, a lot of value add. Everything was value add back in 2008 up through probably 2016. Always had some value add component on it. And so it could be anything from an absolute D that we'll talk about later, I'm sure, up to B type of assets. A little before COVID, we started doing late 90s vintage And we were trying to break into some newer properties right before COVID. And we're not having any luck. And then COVID hits, and a lot of the institutional buyers vacated and went away. And that gave us the opportunity to jump into the nicer assets that we're doing today. But last year, we bought 80s value add, 90s value add, 2000 value add, all the way up to new constructed lease up deals. And we're doing that today. So we don't discriminate on a deal per se. It's just got to be a good deal. And we'll still do an 80s deal in a great location, which we bought the Starwood portfolio in January of this year, 1,800 units, mostly in DFW or in Dallas. And it's all value add.
Yeah. And then, so you guys, just to kind of set the stage before we get into it, you guys are similar to us, where you just generally take high net worth money. You haven't really partnered with institutions. What's kind of the thought process on why you have stuck with kind of the syndication style high net worth private capital?
I like being a hero for our equity, and our equity are the type that are looking, they're looking for what we have. And so if we're sitting here talking to other sponsors today, I've told people over and over, we've looked at institution, said no to institution. After the last 2 months, probably very thankful we never got tied up with any institutions, because they're trying to sell everything right now. So just having entrepreneurs who need a place to park money into the type of deals that we have is awesome. And then whenever you go full circle and you send them their money back with a really nice return, they are very grateful and appreciative, and that's a lot of fun. And I don't see us changing off of that.
Well, great. Well, so Charlie, you and I actually hung out about 2 weeks ago, maybe, and at a conference in Las Vegas, and we were, kind of sharing our state of the market thoughts. Kind of where are you at right now? Where's your head at? What are you guys doing? I know 2 weeks ago you generally were pretty darn bullish. Has that changed after the Fed meeting this week and Jay Powell bumping rates up 0.75 of a point and beating the drum of SOFR going to maybe 4%? It's kind of what the market's expecting. Where if you looked at November last year, November 21, they were expecting 0 hikes in 2022. And here we are. I've seen, what is that, about 150 basis points a hike already. And it seems like we got, several more, couple hundred basis points ahead of us at minimum in the not too distant future. So kind of, where's your headspace right now? And what are you guys looking at?
So the only change or thing that I did after yesterday was go back through my real estate schedule and see what my debt maturities were and go,
sure,
how bulletproof am I? And, when we were together a couple of weeks ago, a key part of the talk was the capital stack and having the right debt with the right terms and being able to ride through what's to come. I think that's the biggest issue. It's the biggest issue that we deal with today is can you get the debt and having good terms that will work with the project? We talked about the fundamentals. The fundamentals have not changed as far as rent growth, supply and demand. We are so far behind on supply that there's a reason in Dallas we're at 20% rent trade outs, and in Houston we're at 13% rent trade outs. It's because there are too many people looking for too little of a product. And I know that the developers are out, they're hustling, but we're so far behind that I don't see that changing. And so, I think Fed's going to push us into a recession. I think parts of the country are going to feel it pretty significantly. But I would say in the Sun Belt in general, I think that's going to be pretty muted. And I think it's going to be short term.
And so when you say short term, what are you thinking? What are you guys kind of projecting for the portfolio you have? If we're seeing, 20% in DFW and 13% in Houston, and we're seeing, at or near all-time high in occupancy. So we start seeing incomes erode, layoffs. What do your crystal ball tell you is going to impact rent growth, occupancy, collections across kind of your portfolio?
Well, on the market, in my opinion, and a lot of folks, is it's bifurcated into low income workforce housing, moderate workforce housing. With the 80s and 90s that we have, I would call moderate workforce housing, nurses, first responders to, whatever. And then higher income apartments. And the low income workforce housing is just, those folks are getting beat up today. They're the ones that are taking the brunt of the inflation with everything from energy, food, shelter, all the components. And so it's hard to say. I think in those particular areas, I don't think you're going to see a big change. Somebody they go, okay, when's it going to change? And I go, when you can tell me that less people are looking for apartments, and in the Sun Belt, less people are moving into the Sun Belt, are moving out of the Sun Belt, and you've got more supply, then you got a problem. And I don't see that. And so I'm not saying everything's going to be rosy, but I think the fundamentals are pretty good, and I think they're going to stay pretty good, and they're where they are for a reason. We have a lot of people that are coming into our areas that are looking for a place to live.
And so that's one part of it. And on the capital side, I'm assuming you guys have probably a variety of types of loans on your assets, anywhere from some fixed rate, some floating rate. What are you guys kind of underwriting to or shocking your deals to with the hawkish Fed and interest rates on the rise? Where's kind of your guys' head, and what are you guys doing to kind of sensitize that and get prepared for a higher interest rate environment that we're clearly going into?
So everything that we do is floating. We don't do any fixed. We want the availability to exit at the appropriate time, whenever that may be. And I don't know that there's any magic number of, I got asked yesterday talking to somebody about, what level of reserves. I think what we're doing right now, I'll have an LP, so we'll go, okay, interest rates are that high, so our distribution should be higher. And my response has always been, right now we're sitting on cash, because we are going to have higher interest rates and we are going to have higher expenses. Don't know to what degree. So whatever I conveyed as far as a distribution, we're not changing off of that, and we're stacking the rest of the cash back just in an abundance of caution.
So you're basically just looking at your distributions, your cash, and hoarding it. Essentially, is what you're doing. Have you guys gone back and reforecasted and looked at kind of I'm assuming most of your deals, you have some level of an interest rate cap, and then have to replace that cap because you probably don't have a cap for the entire term, or are most of your deals kind of with regional banks and they're uncapped on the interest rates?
So I looked at it today, and I'm not going to have any issues till 2024. And so we've got anything from the large debt funds to regional banks to life cos that's spread across, what we're doing. And so right now we're buying a deal in the Houston Museum District, really more aimed at the medical center. And, it won't be a debt fund. It's a big deal. It'll be a $70 million loan. It'll be a life co or a money center bank that will fall into that. And, we're going to find good deals. And when we find a good deal, and I do believe in the next 6 to 9 months, everybody that's in this business is going to find an opportunity from somebody that needs to get out for a reason, one reason or another. And we'll take advantage of that. And the debt will be whatever's available. And back in 2000, at the early part of COVID, we had a deal that was in Houston. and the seller had to get out, and it was the absolute worst time. And I had Jeremy Sane help me out with that. And I just said, we were getting it at such a basis that it did not matter what the debt level was. I said, I don't care if it's 50-50. This is such a deal. We're going to find somebody. And we went through about 60 lenders before we found somebody that was the appropriate fit. And so I feel that's the same way today. There's going to be something out there. And as we do this.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing today in the marketplace. Interest rates have gone up. Have we seen cap rates expand? Have you started to see the softness in the market? Have you started to see values come down a little bit?
Yeah. So I would say cap rates are probably up 100 basis points. Just what it feels like until you get somebody in to start trying to make a market on the new stuff. But I would say we're looking at about 100 basis point expansion today. And I believe, I hate to use the word transitory, but whenever this volatility falls out, we will see, I think you're going to see a wave of money that's going to come flying back in. And I think your cap rates are going to go back down. But for today, yeah, there's deals.
So any advice for new syndicators just coming into the marketplace right now? You know, interest rates are going up. We just talked about the expansion of cap rates. Values, because those cap rates going up, have come down. What's your advice for some new syndicators are trying to put together these deals together and trying to be the next Charlie Young?
So I would say be extremely patient. Was out looking at deals on Monday, and my message to the brokers that I was looking at their various deals, my money is going to be very patient today, waiting for a really good opportunity. And so I think that's the message for the day is there are going to be people that need to get out for one reason or another. Wait for the right opportunity.
What are you seeing in the deals? I know you have several deals that you've been selling, either one-off or portfolio. How are those going? What are you seeing kind of in real time on the deals that you set, a couple months back?
So we had deals that were already in the market. We already had a PSA executed on them. And so those are pretty well set. And then we had two deals that were not yet. Interest rates had been rising, and we went kind of in an off-market fashion. Had the broker go find their best people that are looking for a deal, and we got two deals put under contract. Some reduction in price, but I think one thing for today is you should, if you bought something 2 to 3 to 4 years ago, you've created a lot of value. You have, and the market has. And if it pulls back and it's still a great deal, a good return, then there's not a reason to not harvest it. And so we've got another deal that we're putting under contract right now that is going to be a really good return. Probably not as good a return as it would have been in January, but who cares? It's still a great return. I don't think there's much of making markets today. So it's probably more of having key brokers go out and they know who the buyers are that are looking and put it out there and go, hey, this is see what somebody offers. And then if it is, 10 to 15% less than what it would have been in January, but that's still a good return, probably a good time to harvest it and move on.
Mike and his team over at SBI, I think, realized a number of years ago to try to transition from the Class C properties to work up the quality up to A's or A minuses. Are you still buying A properties these days? Are you buying any C properties these days? That's question number one. And then two, The people that want to invest into real estate these days, should they be looking at higher quality assets, B assets, C assets? What's your advice on some of that?
So let's talk about that last piece of it first. I think the message right now is, in today's environment for the next 6-9 months, while we have all this volatility, the better sponsors and the better assets are going to have the better chance. So we're doing 2 deals right now. One will close next month. It is a 90s value add. And we had this awarded and already working pre the interest rates running up as they have, under contract. But it's still a great deal. So I did not go back and try to do any retrading of that. But that's a moderate workforce housing deal in Pearland, Texas. And then right now we have a new construction lease-up deal that's in, I think I said, in the Museum District of Houston, and that's a core asset. We're doing both.
In limited partners, what's your take right now? What are you talking to them about, or what should be people talking about for returns or estimated returns, or things that back 2-3 years ago it was pretty good to invest in apartments? What are limited partners' expectations these days through this market?
I think it's returns. Each sponsor is going to put out whatever they have and feel like the return is. And that's what I've always done. I've always tried to put into the lower end. I'm telling people right now, really low on the cash flow. So probably 5% over 5 years blended of yield. But I had a meeting Monday and with 2 new investors, and the message, before I could even get to that, entrepreneurs done very well, and their thoughts were, I need preservation of capital. It's really amazing to me right now. You can watch CNBC all day, and you're going to, the last week, you would not hear any talk about any safety anywhere. And I will tell you right now, multifamily is a safe harbor. Even today, it's a safe harbor. You can buy, in the last 40 years, you could have bought it any point in time. And if you held it for 10 years, you made money. If you held it for 5 years, there may have been 2 spots that in the 5th year, if you had to get out then, you may have lost a little bit. Over 40 years, if you held a multifamily asset for 3 years, there were 6 periods where you would have lost money. And so as long as you have a long-term horizon, multifamily is a phenomenal place to be as a hedge against inflation, preservation of your capital, and tax advantages.
Let's talk a little bit about the presentation that Charlie did about story time. And so let's get Uncle Charlie out there to talk a little bit about some of the fun stuff that he's been through when you buy, operate, and sell multifamily properties. So, Mike, what are some of the stories you remember?
Yeah, I think the 2 stories that you told, I don't know if something else comes to mind, but I thought for sure, or your Baytown deal, which you kind of referenced when we first started talking, and then Paul mentioned you bought half of Woodhaven, or maybe more than half of Woodhaven back several years ago, which is a tougher part historically of East Fort Worth. So maybe kind of talk through that first big syndication you did. I think that was good. That's a good story to illustrate, which we just kind of wrapped up with, that if you have enough staying power, multifamily is a pretty forgiving business. You can make a lot of mistakes and still make some money as long as your time horizon is long enough. But maybe kind of talk through that Baytown deal. Like you said, you went through a financial hurricane and a literal hurricane kind of at the same time. So maybe go through kind of set that whole deal story up, and what were some of the challenges you had? How did you overcome them? And what were some takeaways and lessons that you apply to your business today?
When we were together, I talked about 2 buckets, a bucket of luck that's full and a bucket of experience that's empty. And when we started in 2008, we had a bucket that was full of luck and very little experience as a sponsor. And the luck on the Baytown deal was we had assumed a CMBS loan that had 9 years left on it. And so whenever the recession came in '08, September of '08, we didn't have a debt issue. But at the time, you don't know it. And so we just got really lucky on the debt side of it. But what we weren't lucky on was the capital side of it. And that one was that was as tough as it's ever been for me, and I think for most people. So we had not gotten into the project. It was the one and only time we had to have a capital call. And so I had 7 investors, and they knew that I was going to have to come down, talk to them. And we needed about $50,000 per person. No, it's a little more than that, because it was a total of $600,000. And so I go down, visit with them, and there was a gentleman that was an old wildcatter, and he had the most money in the deal. And we sit around a conference table. I began to tell him what we need and what's going on. He goes, "I understand a dry hole." He thought he had lost all his money. And I said, "Cloyce, no, and multifamily is not a dry hole until you stop drilling. So we just need about $600,000 so that we can put down some multifamily pipe," in his language, "and keep drilling." And he goes, "You need $1.2 million." And I go, "No, sir, I don't think I need $1.2 million." And he goes, "Nah, you need more than 600. And the other people around the table, wealthy, but not as wealthy as Cloyce, go, "Hey, if he says 600,000, let's just leave it at 600,000. So we get our 600,000. Lo and behold, we needed $1.2 million. And so the Madeira partners, we clawed ourselves back on acquisition fee, rehab fees, management fees, everything. And over the time, we ended up pulling together the other 600,000 to be able to get the project through the hole. And there was a time, literally, we went out and bought a riding mower. And there was a day that I was out there myself mowing the lawn. Call that stupid. At the time, you don't know what you're doing, and you're just trying to figure it out. And so we got through that. We held it for 8 years, sold it, and they made 3X on their money through one of the worst recessions multifamilies had. And so the learning lesson there was, make sure if you've got enough time on your debt and you do the right things, and the right thing is investing in the goose that lays the golden egg, then you can survive.
It's good. And then I know you guys pivoted to Woodhaven. I thought that was a pretty crazy story. So you guys maybe kind of set that up. Woodhaven is kind of East Fort Worth, historically pretty tough neighborhood in the kind of the 70s and 80s.
Historically pretty tough. I remember the story. This is a beautiful golf course that is in that area. And it's surrounded by a bunch of apartment buildings, and just the beautiful neighborhood, absolutely gorgeous. And they were all built in probably the late 60s, 70s, and part of the 80s. And I remember a story that somebody was playing golf, and they were having a great day. And then one of the tenants from one of the buildings walked down onto the golf course, demanded the guy's wallet, grabbed his wallet, and then ran back up to the property. And it just disappeared. So that sets kind of the tone of Charlie coming into Woodhaven, dealing with that type of stuff.
Yep, that sounds about right. So sitting around, I'll tell 2 stories out of this one. Sitting around with some brokers one day, always fun to sit around with those guys and talk your war stories and see who's got the worst war story. And so I'm sitting around with the guys one dinner. And so Woodhaven I said, okay, I got your story. So Woodhaven was a deal that whenever you initially start, you typically have to take projects that other people don't want. And so there was a property on the outside called Lincoln Meadows that a well-known sponsor, and there were 4 properties, and a well-known sponsor wanted the one in South Arlington and didn't want the other 3 primarily because of the one that you would have to take that was in Woodhaven, Lincoln Meadows. So we bought that. It was on the outside. And when we took it over, the manager was literally on crack. And it was bad. So we began the process of learning how to manage getting the prostitutes and the drug dealers out. And so we started buying properties on the outside, not by design, it just happened. And then we realized, okay, we're learning how to manage this. And once we got about 3 on the north, on the east and south side, there was one on the west that was really bad, and it was in receivership. And I said, okay, I'm going to go buy that. And it was 154 units. Everything was always 83% mythically occupied until you got in and you figured out who really didn't have a lease or whatever. And it was just bad. I mean, we were going to buy it for about $13,000 a unit. And I wanted a property that you could just about rebuild from the ground up. So one day I go out there and there's one way in. You could go to the left or you could go to the right. And off to the left was all this authority commotion that was going on. Said, I probably don't need to go that way. And so I turned right, going up the parking lot. And we'd been around long enough that I could just drive by a property. We're going to replace everything inside. So you can just drive by it and go, okay, first building I come to had 4 burned out units. I go 50,000 a piece. Keep going. I go, man, the siding shot, roof shot, windows are shot, doors are shot. I get to the end of the parking lot and I go, well, we're going to replace everything on this property. And so turn around, come back. And before I could get to the exit, 2 cops come up. And one stands in front of the car to stop me. The other one comes over the window. I roll the window down. He looks at me and he goes, you don't belong around here. You're either buying or selling. Which is it? I said, I'm buying, just not what you think. And I told him what we were doing. He says, you are out of your mind if you're going to buy this deal. I said, well, for $13,000 a unit, I'm buying it. And so what was happening that day was it had gotten so bad that the city said, you have to go out and evict anybody that doesn't have a lease. So the constables were on site. They were going unit to unit. If you didn't have a lease, they were moving you out. So the 100 mythically occupied units went down to 12. And we ended up buying out the other 12 to leave. So we had this empty slate. And we put a fence around it. We put a guard out there. That did not stop the bad guys from coming and trying to do drug deals. So we went to the city and said, hey, do you need a place to run any exercises? And they said, our SWAT team needs a place. And so they would come rolling in a couple of times a week, run their exercises, and lo and behold, the problem got solved. So I told that story at this broker dinner. And one of the guys goes, I can do you one better than that. I go, all right, let's hear it. He goes, and the name of the property was Surrey Oaks. He goes, my first tour was at Surrey Oaks, probably 6-7 years before that. He says, I was the one elected to go out, take a buyer out there. And so go in, park, meet the broker, and off to the left again is authority commotion. And they're hanging out around a dumpster. And what happened that day was they pulled a rolled up carpet out of the dumpster, unrolled it, and there was a dead lady in the carpet. The maintenance guy had killed his wife, rolled her up in carpet, and stuck her in the dumpster. I said, okay, you win. You got the better story. So there's lots of great stories from, just being in the business and trying to make them work.
Yeah, that's a great story. It's I think that's some Jarnigan that told that story.
It is Jarnigan.
Yeah. Mike, any crazy stories for you? Looking back, not finding dead bodies in garbage places.
Yeah, we fortunately never bought a tough, well, unfortunately, whatever you want to look at it, bought as tough of deals as Charlie.
It ended up being a 6X, so it worked.
Yeah, it's all green at the end of the day, I guess. So 6X, you deal with a little bit of pain, but I remember, a couple things like, you go buy a deal, one of the first deals we bought, and go walk in units. You go into one of the units, and the guy had his motorcycle in the unit, and he was changing his oil to his motorcycle inside his unit. Or we had another property that had, a couple ponds on it, and, you go walk some units, and one of the residents would go capture the ducks on the pond and put them in a fish aquarium for, dinner that night, and, all sorts of crazy stuff. Another property had, walking in November, and in Texas in November is deer hunting season. And this guy he was on a ground floor unit, and he had strung up a deer that he was dressing from the balcony above him on his balcony downstairs. Those are some things that just kind of come to mind, but it's a crazy business. You get into it, and you have a lot of people that live in close proximity to each other. So there's bound to be, it's a problem business. There's always a problem. And, I know Charlie's a little closer to it because Madera is vertically integrated. So I know Charlie's fortunate enough to be on the deal side. He doesn't necessarily have to deal with all the crazy day-to-day stuff. I'm sure his partners take the brunt of that. And I'm sure Charlie's thankful he gets to go do more of the fun things and kind of grinding it out and day to day. So it's always a problem business. So I think that's good for people to kind of hear some of these stories that we kind of laugh about now, but I'm sure at the moment he was out there riding that lawnmower, it probably wasn't very fun, Charlie, in the moment, but with the benefit of hindsight, it kind of gives you a lot of character.
I said we need to get together sometime and we can come up with the top 10 of how you got a value add. And my best one would be, so if you're doing due diligence and you pull up to a 2-bedroom unit and there is a lime green Cadillac with big rims on it, you walk in and the guy has his tattoo parlor in the kitchen and his other bedroom is his pimping room, you probably have a value add.
Probably do. So,
and that's a true story.
You could be a redneck I like those ones. So just finishing off a little bit, people are always asking Mike's opinion, always asking your opinion about where should people invest? Where's your take in the geographic? It sounds like you guys have built some large positions in the Houston area. You've built some positions down in Knox and Henderson area of Dallas. What are some of the areas that you like right now?
Are you talking about in a particular town or?
Yeah. Do you still like Houston? Do you like?
I can tell you Frisco is not going to feel a recession. Yeah. Not happening. So, we are putting a little equity out right now on a joint venturing with a group on a development in Frisco. We own a deal in Frisco. We own deals in McKinney and Allen. Those areas are not going to, there's going to be very little pain in those areas. As an example, in Houston, I love the medical center. I like places, there's going to be a lot of supply that's going to come to the Frisco area, but there's so much demand. They're so far behind that you're going to continue to see an opportunity for really good rent growth. In Houston, it needs to be I like a little more constrained area. So the medical center has been an area that I like because of one, you got 110,000 jobs today. You got 2 projects down there that are underway right now that in 3 years, when they're done, they're going to put another 40,000 very high paying jobs in that pocket. And what is proposed to be built there now is very little. And so what that does is gives us an opportunity to be in a very constrained area with a lot of jobs. And so those are 2 examples. Sugar Land's always great because it's hard to build there. We're buying impaired land and we're buying an older deal because that's another area that doesn't like apartments and very hard to build in. Those are a handful of them, but yeah, we bought the deal in Knox, the Knox area of Dallas, and what's about to happen there. What's already happened and what is coming is going to be phenomenal. And so we feel really good about that. We can be as long-term or as short-term as we need to be. So we underwrite for 5 years, but we're selling some stuff right now that we've had for 2 years because it's a great opportunity to do it. But if need be, we will sit and camp out and wait for the demand to overrun the little supply that's there.
Good stuff. So, Charlie, definitely appreciate you coming on. People want to find out more information about you or get in contact with you. Is there any resources maybe you could put out for people to find out about Madera and yourself?
Charlie at maderaresidential.com. Pretty easy.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Paul?
Yeah, Charlie at maderaresidential.com. So Charlie Young, we hope to have you back in the show, talk a little bit more about some of your secret sauce that you have, and since you've been doing this for such a long period of time. I mean, you didn't have buckets of experience, you had buckets of luck, and now that has made you now buckets, hopefully lots of money to you and to your investors. So if somebody's interested in talking with Madera Residential, we certainly do bang the table for Charlie and his team over there. So again, Charlie, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate that. Michael, always a pleasure. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.